On the Track is a web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
So what do we have in this episode, Mr. John?
Well, Hennis, first of all, we're going to Portugal for the second half of my interview with our old friend Steve Andrews. And then we're going to Loch Ness with another old friend of the show, Ian Squibbs, who's looking at yet another famous Loch Ness monster photograph. Or is it?
I really like the old credits.
And now, it's Gwen Dibley's Pearls of Wisdom.
Scabby donkeys sent each other over 10 hills.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of On the Track. My name's John Downs. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and it shows how busy we are at the moment that I'm actually filming this just after we finished watching the live premiere of last week's episode. So, on behalf of me and Lilith the cat and Archie the dog, it's great to welcome you to the show. What is the show, you might ask? Well, for those of you who are newcomers, newbies, as I believe the current vernacular has it, every Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock and every Wednesday evening at 6:30, we bring you what I like to think of as a whole sort of mishmash. I've had enough of describing it as a mélange or potpourri because that sounds all foreign and slightly pretentious. So I think I prefer to call it a whole general mishmash of stuff about hard science, weird shit, and surreality. What's surreality? Well, I think you might have to ask the cat.
Surrealism is a cultural movement that developed in Europe in the aftermath of World War I, in which artists depicted unnerving, illogical scenes and developed techniques to allow the unconscious mind to express itself.
Thank you very much, Lilith. That was very enlightening. Now, before we go any further, I just want to tell you about what my brother has been up to. Well, ladies and gentlemen, much as though it pains me to tell you this, but there are more important things in life than cryptozoology and the other disciplines that we talk about on this show. And there are even more important things than elderly gentlemen dressing up in chicken costumes and generally playing the fool. Because although I tell you that looking at things through humour is one of the best ways of analysing the world around us, there are some things which you can't laugh at, and this is one of them. You may or may not know that my little brother Richard, who's 4 years younger than me, is a clergyman who lives and works in Germany, and recently he visited Ukraine, and he was so upset and appalled at the conditions that the people are living there that he saw while he was there that no sooner had he returned to his wife and family in Germany, but he started up a amazing campaign. In Ireland there's a company called Kelly Kettles who make these wood-burning kettles which do not need external power sources. in order to be able to cook and to boil water and to provide heat. And Richard has done a deal with these people, and he has managed to get the Kerry Kettle Company to donate at cost these kettles, which are going to be sent to Ukraine. And Richard is raising money now to buy as many of these kettles as possible. And although I never ask you to raise money on these pages for us, it's very kind of you when you do donate something, but I never ask for money. I now am. Please, can you use the link below and send some money to my brother, who is doing his best to alleviate some of the horrific suffering which the Ukrainian people are undergoing this winter. I am going to be running this advert, because I suppose it's an advert. I've never made an advert before, but I'm going to be running this advert every episode until the springtime. And if the war is still going on when we come to the colder months of the year next year, then I'll be running it again. And now over to Portugal for the second part of what looks very much like it's going to be a three-part interview with my old friend Steve Andrews.
Well, as I say, if we can get through January now, the monarchs, the swallowtails, they should be able to just keep going. And the monarchs, this is just amazing. I mean, I lived in Tenerife before, as you know, and I used to have monarchs there. And in Tenerife, they keep going right through the winter because it's warm enough. Usually here in Portugal, it's not, but as you can see here, in this plastic bottle you can see them there. There's a caterpillar pupating, there's a chrysalis there, and I got some more in this, yeah. Look at all those.
Wow.
And all of those are in last instar and are about to change into chrysalises. And there's a caterpillar on that.
That's fantastic.
So I think what I was trying to say as well is that all of this is a result of climate change and how these insects are adapting and surviving. And an example of, like, I'm just one person here with access to a garden, you know, and I grow the right plants. So what I'm saying, and I say this to everybody, is that, and I know, John, you already know this, but maybe some of the viewers don't know. Butterflies and moths, they need the right plants for their caterpillars. And that's how their distribution is based. Like if there's a country and the plants grow there, then they can live there. It's like that with the monarch. Because there are two types of milkweed that'll grow in this country, in Portugal, the monarch can live here. It's the same in the Canary Islands. Before there were any milkweeds there, they could not survive. So it's most important to grow the right plants. Now I'm growing two types of milkweed. One is technically not a milkweed, but it's related. It's the balloon plant, the bristly fruited silkweed, whatever you want to call it, Gomphocarpus. I've got that, and I've got the tropical milkweed, the Asclepias. So I got those two for the monarchs. I got Aruda, we call it in Portugal, for the swallowtails. I got broccoli, that the landlord's vegetable patch, for the small and the large white. I got annual nettles for the red admirals. And so basically all those species are able to thrive here, and without really that much work from me, and without that much in the way of, you know, me having to do anything. Well, okay, I mean, you know, I put these in this plastic bottle here, but I don't need to do that. And that's something else. This time of year, I came up with that idea because the wasp will attack the caterpillars in a normal year. The wasps are not out right now. The wasps are following their normal thing, that they're dormant. Well, the queen wasp is dormant for the winter. There are no worker wasps out. The workers normally would attack the caterpillars, but they're not around, so the caterpillars are actually safe. And on that subject, I remember when I was living in Tenerife, I had a surplus of caterpillars. And I took them to another area where I knew there were milkweeds growing in a public space, and I put the caterpillars on there. And I thought, okay, they'll be all right now. They've got plenty of food. A few days later, I had to go to the same area because I was doing a gig there. And I thought, I'm just going to call in and see how the caterpillars are doing. They were all gone, and there were no holes in the plants. And I thought, well, what's going on here? I took perfectly healthy caterpillars. They must have been really hungry. Why have they not eaten these plants? And then I saw a worker wasp searching the plant. And I thought, that's it. And as I'm sure you know, John, like if a wasp finds a food source, it's going to go, back to the same place, and it's going to tell the other workers, and they're going to come there. And so that was when I discovered that the worker wasp is a serious enemy of the monarch butterfly caterpillar. And I thought, well, okay, what can I do about that? I can reuse plastic water bottles by putting them inside. It works really well. And otherwise, I also use sandwich boxes, for people wonder, like, well, what can I do? How do I look? I look after them in sandwich boxes like this. So I think what I'm trying to say is it's actually, quite easy to help the butterflies and moths, that are living in the world, but are actually all having a problem, like worldwide. And I'm sure there's a decline in these species. So, yeah, that's something I wanted to say.
I'm interested what you said about the red admirals, because as I'm sure you know, the red admirals have historically always overwintered in North Africa and then made their way in the late winter, early spring, slowly up through Europe, stopping along the way to breed stopping along the way to mate, have the babies, then they die, then the adults die, and another generation goes further up until they reach Britain, and I believe even further north. Up until now, the red admirals have always, except for the odd occasional one, gone up as far as Britain and then migrated back south, doing the same thing again. But now, with the weather generally warming, we're getting resident populations in red admiral species, But I would have thought that historically, the red admirals where you are would have been resident. They wouldn't have migrated, but now they seem to be migrating. So the weather is having a major difference certainly on red admirals, and I would hazard a guess on painted ladies and the tortoise shells as well. I don't know about the tortoise shells, but I'd hazard a guess it would be.
John, the small tortoiseshell lives here, but only in the north of Portugal. You don't get any in the area I'm in. Also, the peacock, you don't get them in this area, so they live further north. The painted lady we do get here, we seem to get painted ladies right through the year, but I don't really know, how that comes about. When it was too hot, there weren't even any painted ladies, but generally you can find, the odd one right through the year. But that's a butterfly that, as I'm sure you know, it has like a whole lot of different food plants. So that isn't a problem for that butterfly. The red admiral, as you were just saying, used to migrate up through Europe and to the UK. What I am seeing is that they are doing that. But the major problem for them as to why they can't become resident, which you were talking about, is that from spring onward, just becomes like just so hot here that certainly the annual nettle is gone. If you were a red admiral female and you were looking for food plants in the area I'm in, you'd find nothing.
No, I'd be going as far north as I could get before I laid my eggs.
Yeah. So actually, further north in Portugal and probably up in mountain areas, then there would be stinging nettles. But in large areas of Portugal, there would be no nettles at all. And so it probably, I've got no way of checking. I don't know whether there are resident red admirals in some parts of Portugal. There might be. But certainly in the area I'm in, they've got nothing. They've got no food plants from late spring all the way through until like maybe quite late in the autumn when the rains come.
How has the change in weather patterns affected the larger animals, the vertebrates?
Well, it's larger animals, amphibians, I've been actually worried about, because going back to last spring, February and March, there should be a lot of water, and it's what we call temporary ponds. Temporary ponds should be full of water. Wetlands where maybe a field or something floods should be flooded. This year there was nothing, and the temporary pools didn't exist. Areas which are normally flooded were not flooded, so there was no water about. So a whole load of amphibians that depend on temporary water sources in the spring were not lucky. In the summer, it got so hot and dry here that I don't even know where any surviving amphibians would have gone. But as you know, I mean, they'll seek out places they can get out of the way. They're going to go down, or they're going to go into underneath rocks or wherever they can find. It must have been hard for them because it was really hot and dry here, really hot and dry. And now that it's autumn, I know I haven't seen any in the area I'm in, but I've seen photos and footage that other people share on the Facebook Portugal Wildlife Group, that there are natterjack toads and salamanders, and they're making for the water now. So the amphibians are surviving. I don't know what's going to happen exactly where there's something I need to do. I need to go and have a look at the state of the temporary pools here, which are probably going to be absolutely brimming full of water because we've had so much, which is great. And the reptiles, I think, reptiles are pretty much okay with hot weather. The reptiles get through the winters here okay, and we've got all kinds of reptiles here. We've got geckos. The geckos are fine with the cold weather. They seem to just get out of the way. They come out when it's warmer again. There are several snakes that live here. Plenty of lizards which live here. The lizards are still out and about. If I go to the supermarket here, there's a species of wall lizard. There's a colony of them that lives outside the supermarket. And in December, I can go to the supermarket. If the sun is out, I can expect to see wall lizards there.
Well, Ian, it's lovely to have you back again. I wasn't expecting to have you back for ages. So, what are we talking about today?
Well, hello, John. It's good to be back on CFZ TV and take another sideways look at reality. Today, we're going to have a look at the 1960 Peter O'Connor photo of the Loch Ness monster. So let's begin. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the films of Ed Wood, B-movie filmmaker from the 1950s and referred to as the worst film director of all time. His films were so bad that they are entertaining for the wrong reasons. Bad acting, bad editing, nonsensical scripts, continuity errors, wobbly sets, and laughable special effects. His most famous film, Plan 9 from Outer Space, that starred a 72-year-old drug-addicted Bela Lugosi, is a complete mess and regarded as the worst film ever. Flying saucers in Plan 9 looks like this. That's the level of special effects that Wood deployed there, and you can see that in Plan 9. That's my own version there. You get the idea.
Yeah, I thought that was quite convincing, to be quiet.
Yes, had me fooled as well, but no, it's the magic of the movies, John. So
I've been to UFO conventions where they show less convincing flying saucers than that.
Yes, but anyway, Lugosi was actually dead when filming took place, and Wood got someone else to stand in as Lugosi. The actor was taller than Lugosi, and his face was covered in all of his scenes, and he was clearly not Lugosi. That was just a typical occurrence in the world of Ed Wood filmmaking. Many of his films are on YouTube, so check them out if you haven't seen them already. Now, what if Ed Wood was to produce a photo of the Loch Ness Monster? Then what would it look like? Well, I have the answer, and we're going to have a look at such a photo today. Plan 9 from Outer Space was released on the 22nd of July, 1959. In October of that year, articles appeared in the Sunday Express and the Glasgow Herald reporting that a group of men from Gateshead planned to go to Loch Ness armed with Bren guns and bombs in an attempt to kill the Loch Ness Monster. The spokesman for this group of men was a fireman by the name of Peter O'Connor, who eventually admitted he was having a joke and he wasn't really going to kill the Loch Ness Monster. A year later, in May 1960, a few weeks after Tim Dinsdale had filmed A Boat, Peter O'Connor and his colleague Fred Fulcher were camping on the shore of Loch Ness searching for the monster. Thankfully, though, without their guns and their bombs this time. On the 27th of May, O'Connor was lucky enough to see and photograph the monster and gave the following report of his encounter. Between 6 a.m. and 6:30 a.m., I left the camp 1 mile northeast of Foyers Bay and went northeast for 100 yards. The Loch Ness Monster glided around the headland at a fast walking pace. I waded into the deep water to get a close look at the route that intended passing as possible. I was waist deep and decided to get no closer as it had turned its head in my direction, and I'm sure it knew I was there. For a moment, a horrible one, I thought it intended coming towards me. I watched its head closely. It had a small sheep-like features set on a very, very strong neck. The muscles kept rippling in it. It reminded me of a panther's leg when pacing a cage. The head was approximately 10 inches long. The neck, 6 to 7 inches in diameter, increasing in thickness towards the water. There was 2 to 3 foot exposed between the neck and a large hump or body, greyish-black in colour. Where I expected its limbs, i.e. Plesiosaurus, I saw the occasional swirl of water indicating them. I saw no eyes, but its facial structure suggested it had them. But its lids were shut. The skin appeared smooth as a seal, but it could have been fine scale. When I took the photograph with the flashbulb inserted, I turned and yelled to my companion who was lying in the tent. The tent was built so a view of the loch could be obtained in any direction, i.e. no walls or cliffs, etc. And as I did so, I gave the camera a couple of turns and took another photo of it disappearing with a great deal of commotion in the water. My friend said he saw something black for an instant and the water disturbance, which was not small. I was within 25 yards of the creature when the photograph was taken. I'm not sure if the light or my voice frightened it. One or both did. I am not fully satisfied that it was the same creature I had seen on Wednesday, May the 24th, as it was smaller and a different colour. So yeah, so this appeared to be the second time that O'Connor had seen the monster. So he continued, I think both skins were wet or at least damp. One on Friday certainly was. I do not know why I was frightened of it, as it reminded me of a docile swan. Perhaps it was the power it had at its disposal and the fact that it was an unknown quantity. So that's what O'Connor said of the encounter. So, John, let's have a look at it then. So let's see the photo and see what the image O'Connor took there. So, yeah. So, right. So, as we can clearly see, that is not a monster. It's just a motionless mock-up of some kind, and not a very good one at that. So you've got the large humped back type structure, then a longish neck type rigid appendage at the front. I think it would have been better probably if he hadn't included the neck and just had the hump in the photo, as the neck does look a bit stupid. The neck is obviously some kind of log or fence post, and there doesn't even seem to be a head. So we have a headless monster in that photo. O'Connor couldn't even be bothered to make one, which would have been easy enough to do, I'm sure. Put a sock over the end or something like that, maybe. But anyway, so all in all, it's quite a poor effort. Marks at a 10, 2 maybe, and that's being generous. So yeah, so okay then. So there's been obvious fakes of various mystery creatures in the past, but this one seems to have got more mileage than it deserves and has appeared in various publications over the years. It's not as widely published as the Surgeon, McNabb, or Stewart photos, but it still does appear in books and magazines and is analysed from time to time. And really, it shouldn't be given the time of day. So let's just have a look at the next image there, John. We've got such a report. You can have a look at that. The Loch Ness Monster, ? And what we've got there is the photo on the front page of the June the 11th, 1960 edition of the Tyneside Evening Chronicle. So it needs there. Roy McCall included the photo in his doorstop of a book, The Monsters of Loch Ness, which is, I don't know if you've read that, it's like a phone directory. And Tim Dinsdale also included it in the early editions of his first book, Loch Ness Monster, though for some reason it was removed from later editions. Dinsdale said of the photo, when I first saw this photo published in a northern newspaper, I was fascinated by it and realized that if it was in truth the monster, it was without doubt the closest and most revealing photograph ever taken, and therefore of unique importance. Upon studying it, I found certain features in it that suggested to me it was indeed the monster, although there were others equally difficult to explain at first sight. But whatever the facts really were about it, I knew there was only one way to find out the truth, and that was to talk to Peter O'Connor himself. This I have now done, and the picture is published in my book because I know it is from the original scrap of negative film, which is genuine. So that's concerning, I would think there. Dinsdale saying that. Why did he not just look at the photo, start laughing, consign it to the rubbish bin or trash can for the American viewers? Yeah, that's more of a mystery to me than what the actual photo shows. Naturalist and Loch Ness author Maurice Burton, who was an advisor to O'Connor prior to his expedition, paid O'Connor's campsite a visit 2 weeks after he had left and found evidence of deception. He discovered charred fragments of what must have been several plastic sacks. There was also a length of string which was attached to half a dozen rocks. It was clear that someone had inflated a plastic sack and weighed it down round the edges with stones. During a later visit to the site by a retired journalist, the discovery of the stick that was used for the head and neck was made. Though this explanation sounds plausible, you have to take into account that Burton was by this time a believer turned skeptic of the monster and enjoyed being a bit of a smart ass and a debunker. He said the McNab photo was simply a stern wave from a ship that has passed shortly while before. The Cockerell picture was just a stick, and the Dinsdale film is a boat. We also have to question why O'Connor was careless enough to leave evidence of his prank laying about so easily to be found. And why didn't Burton keep the evidence to back up his claim? Loch Ness veteran Dick Rayner had another theory as to what the O'Connor picture shows. The photo that is usually published is in fact a cropped version of the original, with the far left side of the monster's hump missing. If we look at the uncropped version, we can see this side of the hump, and there seems to be a small stick-like object jutting out of it near to the waterline. This kind of appendage is common on certain types of canoe so that a rudder can be attached. With this in mind, Rayner has suggested that the object is a canoe on its side, partially submerged. So we can look at the next picture there, John. We can see the uncropped image lay next to a canoe, and we can compare the two, and we can actually see what Dick was on about there. There is a small stick-like object, and you can see the canoe as well. So yeah, makes sense. O'Connor did have a canoe and could have achieved such an image using such a vessel, perhaps with his accomplice holding it in place out of view on the reverse side of the object. So yeah, that could well be. Yeah. Another interesting fact about O'Connor is that he was a taxidermist and was president of the Taxidermist Federation of Great Britain. He even wrote books on the subject. Got a couple to show the people at home there, John, if you want to show them that. This is a couple of O'Connor's publications. Fish Taxidermy by Peter O'Connor and Advanced Taxidermy by Peter O'Connor, a couple of there. So O'Connor was skilled at making dead things appear to be alive, though in this case he didn't do a very good job, really, did he? So yeah, a couple of theories there. Yeah, so now we've got a bit of a fun activity that the viewers can try at home, actually, and create their own O'Connor monster if you haven't got anything better to do. So simply take a trip to your local bakery, buy a standard loaf of farmhouse white bread and a French baguette. So if we go to the next image there, we can see how this can be achieved. And there we go there. You've got the two different types of bread, and they can be arranged in such a way to be like the creature in O'Connor's photo. So yeah, there you go. So you get the idea with that. So yeah, so there we go. There's a roundup of the Peter O'Connor photo. So Ed Wood said, filmmaking is not about the tiny details, it's about the big picture. And I think Peter O'Connor took those words on board when he produced his photo of the Loch Ness monster. So if we just end on a thought, though, if the surgeon's photo is the Citizen Kane of Nessie photos, then the O'Connor photo is Plan 9 from outer space. Thank you.
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, wants me to remind you, always press the notification bell. Otherwise you won't be told when there's a new show to watch.
And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the end of another episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to say a big thank you to all the people but for whom we wouldn't have been able to put the show together. First of all, my dear sweet friend, adopted nephew and producer of this show, Louis, otherwise known as Computer Boy. What do you want to say to the boys and girls?
Hello, thank you for watching.
Goodness, that was eminently sensible compared to the things that Louis says most of the time. Thank you for being such a sensible boy, Louis. And I want to say a big thank you to my guests this time, Ian Squibbs and Steve Andrews. And I want to say a big thank you to Graham Inglis, the Deputy Director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, old friend of mine and also my carer, which at the moment means he pushes me round the corridors of Bideford Hospital 2 or 3 times a week. It was 3 times this week, and it's becoming a total pain in the neck. I very much hope that my feet recover soon so we don't have to do this and I can have time back in my life, which is why we're filming this a week before we have to be putting it out, without having any sort of, what's the word? What do they call it, Louis, when you've got stuff in hand? Louis, don't be disgusting. That was not scripted. But usually I like to have 2 or 3 episodes in the can, so it doesn't matter if I don't manage to record one this week. But it hasn't worked out like this at the moment because of my continual hospital visits. So let's hope that those hospital visits will be curtailed soon. And now it only goes for me to say I'll be back on Wednesday. What are we talking about on Wednesday? I think we're going to be talking about cane toads. Have you got anything you want to say about cane toads, Louis?
Yes, but no. It would be not appropriate for this audience.
What do you mean, yes, but no?
Do you want me to make some tortured analogy about BDSM and cane toads?
Probably not, Louis. I think you were probably very wise not to say that.
Oh.
Yes, we'll be back on Wednesday talking about BDSM dungeon toads, and we'll be back next Saturday with the 3rd part of my interview with Steve Andrews, and we will be talking to the lovely Katie Elizabeth about her latest project. So, until then, are you ready, V. McCrinnan? By the way, if you can hear noises in the background, it was originally my stupid dog turning out the bin. Now it's my stupid dog on the landing barking at people outside. Are you waiting, McCrinnan? Good. Because if I'm around and you're there to see it, I'll be seeing you. Bingo.